Welcome back, little helpers. So, Kibby and I tend to do a lot of episodes on relationships. It's both of our greatest interest. And part of learning about relationships is seeing what's out there kind of colloquially or in like pop psychology. And one thing that comes up all the time is the five love languages. This is something that is talked about in therapy. It's a concept that comes up on social media all the time. It's talked about within relationships. It kind of infiltrated our society. And so we wanted to give some attention to the love languages today and see, is this a valid concept? What does the research literature say about this? And how can it apply to your relationships? So, Kibby, can you tell us a little bit about the five love languages?
Yeah, this concept of five love languages is just so commonplace that I never even questioned it. Like, just assumed that it was a thing that everyone knew. Um, but it hasn't been around for that long. There's an American author named Gary Chapman, who's like a counselor in marriage therapy, published a book in 1992, The Five Love Languages, How to Express Heartfelt Commitment with Your Mate. And of course, it was like super popular. It was on the bestseller list, and it still is super popular on Amazon. Any kind of like online media and blog will talk about this, right? As you said, like social media. And then when we went into the research, there really wasn't that much. And it just reminds me that it's not to say that this is, we're going to still talk about them. It's not to say that the love languages are completely BS. But there are some topics out there in psychology that are very popular and commonplace, that don't have a lot of empirical backing. And like, what does
Yeah,
that mean? How do we understand them?
it's a very important point. We take so many things for granted just because we've seen it before. And I mean, it's an interesting thing to talk about too, especially given the rise of like TikTok mental
Mm.
health
Oh,
and mental
yeah.
health advocates and how many people will come into our offices and say, I think I'm autistic, or
Uh-huh.
I have I'm ADHD, and then they'll use some weird terminology about their symptoms. It's like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? So we see these pop psych terms pop up, and they might not actually have much empirical backing at all, but they get so embedded into the zeitgeist, and we just
Yeah.
take them for granted.
Especially now I'm getting into industry. It's funny how mental health and relationships and psychology in general, the kinds of things that people have all had experience with. So they feel like they know, but then
Mm-hmm.
they start to use these concepts that don't even make any sense. Like trauma, the words trauma, narcissist, gaslighting. Like
Yeah.
now it's like everyone is saying these things, but they don't really know what they mean, what they mean. And I think the problem would be if there's like really false information being spread. So, love language is a interesting one because I found that the concept is pretty useful in thinking about your own relationship and how you receive and express love. And yet we don't have to get stuck on exactly the five. And these are like, set in stone. It's just, I think there still can be usefulness from this idea that there's different
Mm-hmm.
ways that we express love. But there could be more than these five. So
Yeah. So the five are quality time, acts of service, physical touch, gifts, and what am I missing?
words of
Words of
affirmation.
words of affirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So physical touch is, as you could expect, physical affection, hugs, kisses, sex is kind of involved in there, massages. Words of affirmation are positively acknowledging one's partner with compliments or positive feedback. So just like a kind of a verbal expression of love. Quality time is kind of cool. Is a preference for spending time with partner and getting their undivided attention. So it's not just spending time with them, is really like dedicating time and attention to each other
Mm-hmm.
directly, without like multitasking. And gifts is like gift giving. Um, it doesn't matter what the gift is, but it's just the idea that someone is, maybe like using resources or putting thought, effort, and expense into something that they're going to give to that other person. And the last one, acts of service, is the idea that actions speak louder than words. When one partner performs behaviors to help the other partner, does something, is useful, helps them with tasks and things like that. So it's more like showing with kind of helpful behavior.
Yeah. So if we talk just sort of anecdotally, I mean, has this been a helpful concept for you, the five?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's most helpful for me thinking about it in relationships that weren't going well,
Mm-hmm.
or relationships that people were feeling unloved and there was like a constant miscommunication about that. Like from me, Chapman thought that you had one primary love language, that you receive and express love the best.
Mm-hmm.
That has since in research not been true. We have more than one, but you
Mm-hmm.
might have a couple primary ones, right? Ones that you prefer. For me, mine's active service. So anyone that helps me with things, or um, just puts effort into helping me with, take the load off my mind, or does something to show that they're really putting effort into contributing to something that we're doing in the shared way. Um, yeah, like it's just small things, but every time my husband just like makes the pediatrician appointment without me having to ask or remind
Mm-hmm.
him, or he just feeds the dog, takes the dog out, right? Just like things that just that person does. I feel like, oh, like this is a good relationship. I feel really loved and cared for.
Yeah.
But the relationships that haven't been going well, uh, they won't be doing that, but they would be showing in a different way, like words of affirmation. And it always feels nice. There's always a part of me that goes, oh, that person loves me. I know they love me, but I don't feel loved.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I've always been very skeptical about these and
Hmm.
kind of felt that they were bullshit because they feel so arbitrary to me.
Yeah.
And I can't figure out one that I need more than another. I
Hmm.
mean, the only thing I'll say is that gifts and acts of service they kind of stand out more, because when you get a gift, it's like, wow, that's a gift. Versus when you get quality time, that just kind of feels embedded into the relationship for me. Like, of course, we're spending quality time. Of course, we're giving each other undivided attention. That's what dating is.
Hmm.
But I mean, maybe other relationships work differently than mine, I guess. But every time you go on a date, it seems like that's quality time. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
words of affirmation, like, yeah, I need those to feel good in a relationship. I need to know that my partner loves me, that he admires me and respects me in some way. But obviously that's a spectrum. I mean, I've had some I've had some relationships where the man was very effusive and some where he was less effusive. But it just like those two and touch all kind of just seem like that's what dating is. I mean,
Hold on a second. You're telling me that there isn't one or two love language that you feel like is like your favorite? Like think about the times you felt the most loved. What was that person doing?
okay, I've never had a relationship where physical touch hasn't been huge.
Hmm.
Like, I'm very, very touchy feely. Men tend to, I mean, men, first of all, always name touch. Like, I've yet to meet a man who does not name touch as his love language.
That I thought was not your favorite physical touch.
Well,
I know that you're touchy feely, but I remember you saying at some point that physical touch was not the primary way that you express affection for someone.
that's probably because I didn't want to have sex with my partner. I
Ah.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Refer to in the emotional abuse episode. Wink. Um,
yeah, I mean, in general, I mean, even in my last relationship, I think you would see me be pretty physically affectionate with him. Like,
yeah, but I remember in that one you specifically said that this is not the primary way. Like that person was
yeah,
asking more of that from you, and you were like, "That's not the way I show love. I show in different ways."
yeah, I think that might have been specific to how I felt in general. I mean, but I mean, like, but also physical touch isn't just sex. Like, I mean, it's funny with friends, I'm not physically affectionate, but with my romantic partner, like, people have commented on how gross it is that we'll be out in public, and I'm like constantly petting him.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, that has just always felt like a given. words of affirmation. I mean, again, in my last relationship, I would have said, yeah, I don't express love that way. And yet every time I'm on this podcast or making Instagram posts about my current partner, I'm like heavily using words of affirmation and complimenting him, knowing he'll see it or listen to it and feel good about himself. I mean, and meaning it. I mean, whether he reads it or not, like I mean it. So, but I've always kind of needed words of affirmation. I've needed it for myself, whether or not I've been able to give it. So there's also kind of, it's sometimes been a mismatch between how I give love and how I receive it. I've been a gift giver in the past, but I think sometimes I give gifts because I don't feel capable of other forms. Like I don't feel capable of physical touch or words of affirmation. And so a gift is like almost a get out of free card, or get out of jail free card. Get out of free card. I was get out of free for a very long time. So
sure, the love language can be really complicated if you're in a difficult to love relationship.
Yeah.
So you might not be the best person to
no, but all of these prove why this concept has not been validated.
Yeah.
Because it's just so complicated. It differs relationship to relationship. One act can load on multiple love languages, like cooking together is both quality time and an act of service. So it's just measurement difficulties abound.
Yeah, I mean, the research is saying, as you could probably guess, that we're learning these love languages from our family, right? We grow up, our parents are showing us love in a particular way, you know, a parent who's really cuddly, or the parent who teaches the kids how to do things or gives them like toys or presents or something. Now the person grows up to really associate, oh, this is how love is expressed. And generally it seems that people who prefer a love language express it as well as tend to receive it, or prefer to receive it. So people who like partners who are well matched on that, that's great, right? But partners who are not well matched on that, I guess it's the challenge of that person having to figure out what the love language is of the other person and try to express it in that way. And there's a lot of like, I'm sure couples therapy all about that, where it's, you know, that person doesn't love me, he doesn't care, and he's like, but I did this for you, I paid the bills, I did this, and they're like, yeah, but you didn't give me flowers, right? Like that's such a stereotypical example, but if you don't speak the same language, right, if you're miscommunicating there, that could be really tricky, because it's like, it would be like if you're being vulnerable and expressing your love in the way that you know how, and the other person still doesn't receive it. That's frustrating for both people, right? You just feel like you're working for nothing.
Yeah. And I've seen that happen anecdotally, and I've seen that happen in my relationships. But the research, a paper from 2017, actually, and it was hard to find modern papers on this. They're So it found that actually it was not a problem to have misaligned love languages.
Oh.
But at the same time, it said that a moderating effect was if women are high in the ability to self-regulate, then misaligned love languages are not a problem. But it also said that overall love languages were not a problem. So I mean, misaligned love languages were not a problem. So that confused me. But this idea of self-regulating, it means all sorts of things, right? You can like regulate your emotions, you can regulate your responses. But the way that the reason this was important for love languages theoretically is that the woman can kind of figure out the other person's love language and adjust for it. So it didn't matter as much if they were naturally misaligned. And the reason there was this gender effect they're hypothesizing is because women are often the partner who kind of determines the relationship satisfaction because they are more emotionally and romantically attuned.
Cool. Okay, that answers it, because when you said that, I got confused because I saw another paper that says expressing the love language that is the primary of the other person. So if you express a love language that's in line with what your partner prefers, that predicts relationship satisfaction. So I was like, oh yeah, matching makes sense. You make the person feel loved. But what you're saying is it doesn't matter if that's your primary love language. If you just show it in the way that they receive it, prefer to receive it, that's good enough.
Yeah. I guess so. But then we run into the problem that there's actually not much validity to the 5 love languages.
Yes. So this was interesting to dive into because I feel like this is an example of when one dude makes up a concept and it applies to everyone in the world, without researching it or anything like that. Not to shit on this work. I mean, I think that there's got to be a starting place of someone saying, hey, there's this concept of love languages. Here's the 5 that I've noticed in my practice. But there has to be a lot of research to look at, okay, are these actually, are there 5 or are there 6? Or is there really 1 or 2? And there's different manifestations of that. Like, what are we talking about here? There was another paper. So this man, Gary Chapman, is American, right? And you could imagine that a lot of these are ways that Americans might tend to express love for each other. But there was this cool paper in Indonesia looking at if these 5 love languages, are valid in that culture. And like pretty much yes, except there is an additional one called sacrificial love. So sacrificing like time, resources, effort into someone is a sign of love. And I was like, well, see, that's a really good example of how research can kind of flesh out some of these pop psych terms where we're just like, oh, which one of the 5 am I? It's like, and if you don't fit perfectly into them, it could mean that this is just these are not universal love languages. It's just someone came up with this framework and it doesn't actually fit every single individual in the world,
I think it's also hard when somebody comes from a place of like practicing of clinical work, and then they decide that there are 5 love languages based on what they see. Sacrifice, it's kind of, I would imagine that's a little bit harder to see or conceptualize as a love language because it's almost it's not additive. It's not like I'm going to add positive words to you. I'm going to add a gift to you. It's like I'm going to take away something from myself to benefit you. And so I could see how it would be hard to see in clinical work or like hard to conceptualize that way. Maybe. I mean, it just seems like there's probably all these hidden love languages that are just maybe a little bit harder to see. They're less obvious.
Yeah. I can imagine if there's like scarce resources, then it might add a little bit to the other stuff. Like if I give you a gift that that I like worked for and made and sacrificed for, that has like added love than if I just like bought something on Amazon that was like well within my budget.
Yeah. So I mean, it's hard to quantify effort or qualify effort. I guess
that's a good point.
And it's funny. So I was looking at a paper that came out in 1992. So it's actually the exact same year as Chapman. So he talks about maintenance strategies, and these strategies are positivity, openness, assurances, networks, and sharing tasks. And these have had much more empirical support than Chapman's 5 love languages. There was one validation study that found that these maintenance strategies were related to the love languages, so it provided some what we call construct validity to the love languages, because if they relate to something that's very empirically well supported, then there's probably something to them. But basically, this positivity involves interacting with a partner in a cheerful, optimistic, and uncritical manner, which we know from Gottman, criticism and negativity is it's a horseman. Openness refers to
that's a bummer, because then it just means like you have to be cheery all the time. But I see what you mean, like at least loving or compassionate, not just critical.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not all the time, but it's if you're with a cheerful, positive person, it's going to be a better relationship than if you're with a bummer of a person. Openness refers to directly discussing the nature of the relationship and disclosing one's desires for the relationship. Assurances include messages that stress one's continuation in the relationship. And then social network is like interacting with or relying on common affiliations and relatives, and then sharing tasks or attempts
Oh,
to maintain the relationship by performing one's responsibilities, such as household chores. You can see there's a little bit of overlap there with the love
yeah. The
languages.
networks thing is kind of nice.
Uh-huh.
When you said that, I was like, what does that mean? It's like
I
having
know. I was
well
confused too.
connected, what is it? Like, I don't know, but that makes sense to just putting an effort into each other's family and friends. I mean, that's something that I know that my husband, like Alex, really cares about is just spending time and getting to know each other's family and friends and getting integrated. He always says that part. That's nice. Okay. All right. I'm
Yeah.
on board.
Well, and it brings in new ideas. I mean, I know in my last relationship, I was accused a lot of the time of not expressing love enough, but I'm like, I have included you in my family and my friends. Like,
Uh-huh.
I've created this vast social network around you. I've like, I introduced him to my whole family pretty early on. He was invited to everything, and I kept kind of being like, see, like
Yeah.
my family's incredibly important to me, and um, I don't just introduce anyone, but not just introduce, like really involve him. And
Yeah.
then openness. Yeah, like you can give gifts all day long or do acts of service, but if you don't tell your partner about yourself or about your needs, then your relationship is going to crash. And this is a problem when you have misaligned love languages. So that's probably, another, I guess, mediating factor is like if you have misaligned love languages, it's not a problem if you have openness because you can just talk about, oh, flowers are
Mm.
really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't and you expect them to read your mind, then that's what's crashing the relationship. It's not
Mm-hmm.
actually the misaligned love languages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this, thinking about either these relationship maintenance strategies or love languages, I think what they do give us, whether they've empirically validated or not, is kind of what you were just talking about. If how damaging could it be if you love someone, you're doing your best to show them you love them, and you're being accused of not showing you love them, and you're like,
Right.
what's going on? If am I not capable of love? Am I bad at relationships? Am I a bad
Yes.
partner? Like, you could really make you doubt yourself and your ability to love. And I there's so many clients that we talk to who that's like such a deep pain of theirs, of like the way
Mm-hmm.
they love or receive love is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a nice concept to think there are different ways to do that. And
Yeah.
you might not be aware of how you do that. Or you might not be aware of how the other person needs you to do that. But that's a language barrier. That's not necessarily like you're incapable of speaking, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's something that can be easily talked about, or maybe sometimes not so easily talked about, but it's a lot of this strife could be prevented with openness. There is
Mm-hmm.
this concept in this paper about equity.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's that fairness in the relationship is determined by comparing partners' outcome input ratios.
Mm-hmm.
So if both partners feel that the other is, putting in kind of the same amount, and that might be the same amount of different things. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, if they're like, okay, I feel like my partner's putting in a lot and I feel like I'm getting a lot in return.
Uh-huh.
Theoretically, your partner could put in a lot, but you don't feel like you're getting enough because
Uh-huh.
maybe
Yeah.
it's just not what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what they found was that people who have equity in this input output ratio use a lot more maintenance strategies. And that might be a chicken and egg thing. Like, are the maintenance strategies meaning that you get an equitable relationship? Or is it that when you have an equitable relationship, you're more likely to enjoy the relationship and therefore do more to maintain it?
Mm-hmm.
And there was evidence that for people who felt, a lack of equity, they would pull back on their maintenance strategies in some way.
Mm.
And this might be because they're literally trying to equal the scales. Like if I put in less, then you'll get less, and then we'll be equitable.
Mm.
So you might see partners start to punish each other, pull back their maintenance strategies, just not do as much. Or they'll do things like cognitive strategies, like, oh no, maybe I do like what the other person is putting in, or maybe they're putting this in at a deficit because something's going on in their life. Like they'll try to kind of cognitively make sense of it.
Do you think this also applies if that person is putting in a lot, but in their own way of loving versus like your love language? For example, like I was thinking of my past relationship and how acts of service is such a big thing for me.
Hmm.
But and I would express that in like not these terms, but I would ask for what I want, and I wasn't getting that from that partner. But
Yeah.
to be fair, he probably was expressing in other ways. He was expressing words of affirmation a lot and quality time. Didn't
Hmm.
have a job, so it was a lot of quality time. But I'm just kidding. I'm not. Um, but to be fair, like he was expressing love in a different way. Definitely loved me.
Yeah.
Yet it wasn't the thing that I was asking for. Is that equitable?
Yeah, I think that's the differentiation between input and output. He was putting in a lot, but you were not getting much out of it. So
Okay.
your outcome was low, the input was high.
Okay.
But I mean, this specific paper wasn't talking about the love languages because I don't know if they knew that they existed, and so it wasn't talking in terms of those love languages. But I think that happens all the time. I think that happened in my last relationship. I felt like I was putting in a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
some of what I was putting in was my own cognitive load of trying to stay calm,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
regulated,
Yeah.
and there, trying to
Yeah.
stay there. I mean, I was putting in a shitload of energy into the relationship. It's just that some of it was kind of iceberged. Like kind of couldn't you just couldn't see it.
Yeah. I have to say that's really true. The amount of nervous energy you put into it is just so much more than like now where like, I ask you how things are going, you're like, great, like,
Yeah.
um, and that might have actually been what he wanted because he wanted you to focus on him, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. No, I mean, one of the dynamics was like he was very reinforced for um being upset with me
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
by being kind of stony silent. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would perceive that something was wrong, and suddenly he would get my undivided attention. That happened a lot.
I wonder if
So
that is quality time because I do let's
yeah.
say no, because like when I'm thinking about it, I think it's really interesting you said that dating was the quality time for you because you like to and you you've said once that dating is really important because it's like you're always willing to put in effort and show up for your partner. So you like even the act of getting dressed and like
Hmm.
planning a date and going out and doing that together for you, that's like your way of saying, hey, I'm going to spend all of my attention and energy on you tonight.
Yeah.
Um, I would say that you cared about that and he might have cared about quality time in a different way, like doing other activities around a house.
Yeah.
But for you, you were, when you were around the house, you were, part working or reading or talking or watching TV or something. And that's where the
Hmm.
mismatch happened. You probably had the same one, but just
Hmm.
expressed in a different way. So it's interesting how quality time could also be probably elicited by negative attention, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
fighting, if you're, angry with each other, that's also undivided attention.
It is. Well, and it's making
Not in a
it
healthy way,
so
by the way.
so
Don't do
my ex always wanted me to paint with him. And is that quality time? Because it's actually not your undivided attention on the person, it's your undivided attention on the painting, but you're parallel playing.
I think so. Quality time also is doing an activity together
Okay.
and undivided in that activity. Yeah. So
Yeah.
technically, yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's hard to talk about the love languages because I'm like, if they're bullshit, then is it worth even talking about the five love languages? Like if we talk about touch or quality time, I mean, clearly these things are important in any relationship, but
Yeah.
I keep catching myself. I'm like, why are we even having a discussion about if our
Yeah.
love languages are misaligned, if the research isn't even panning out?
Okay. Here's what we can do.
Okay.
Because even just this is why it became so popular with pop psych. It's like there's this concept and you could quickly go to tips, right? It's like,
Uh-huh.
what can I do if my partner wants to, like has gifts for primary love languages? This is what you do. But we could at least be empirically based where it's like these five love languages have been shown in some research, but not all. There might be
Mm-hmm.
more. I think the concept is people receive and give love in particular ways. And
Yeah.
if you give love to that person in the way that they prefer, that's going to help your relationship, right?
Hmm.
So there's the five love language could be five examples of how people can express love, but there might be way more.
Yeah.
So the tip could be, talk to your partner about that. Be
Hmm.
like, you could get out the questionnaire. We could post it online about what your love language is, but you could also say, hey, how do you like to receive and express love? Like, what does love mean? How does love show up for you? When you felt the most loved by me or anyone else, like what were people doing?
Hmm.
And we do this in therapy all the time where you're asking someone to get like a salient memory. Sometimes they're not able to say a generalized, summarized, like, yes, actually, when people, get dressed up and, go on a date, that's when I feel most loved. But you could be like, I felt the most loved when someone planned this beautiful night. We went out to dinner at a place that they knew I liked. And then we went to a show and we just spent the whole night just like talking. Right. And
Yeah.
so you could at least get some memories of what that person associates as like, I've been loved,
Hmm.
and then try to get creative with that. What do you think of
Yeah.
that?
No, I think that's right. I think that's right. I mean, it is clear that people express love in different ways. I think it's less clear whether that is consistent throughout all their relationships. Probably in some ways it is.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody is very physically affectionate, then they're probably just going to be pretty physically affectionate. There might be some relationships where, uh, you don't have the physical connection, and so it's going to be different.
Yeah.
But in general, being able to talk about how you express love, but also putting in some effort in recognizing the way the other person is showing up for you, even if it's not the ways that
Mm-hmm.
you expect.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
think
maybe
that's
looking
true.
for things like sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. If you have that conversation with each other and say, oh, that person's been showing me love by like fixing the faucet, right?
Yeah,
That's not the same as what I would have assumed is romantic, but that's romantic for that person.
right.
Um, and really just almost kind of like rewiring the love languages of just like that might not be the thing that you feel loved by, but like you could in your mind be like, that person is doing that because they really love me.
The other thing I would suggest is being open about if your partner does not express love in the way that you do, try not to make a character assessment about them. So if they don't give you gifts, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are stingy or that
Unromantic.
they're
Yeah.
ungenerous or unromantic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If they don't do acts of service, it doesn't necessarily mean they are lazy. You might not do acts of service for all sorts of different reasons. It may be because that's not your concept of romance. It might be because you don't know what your partner needs, or it's just you just don't think that's your role, or maybe you're kind of insecure about what you can offer. I think that commonly happens with gifts. Some people see a lot of times I've dated men who are just like, yeah, I don't care about gifts. Like, I don't need
Mm-hmm.
gifts. I'm like, okay, but they're awesome. So I don't want
Mm-hmm.
a gift. So really trying to understand that a lack of any given love language doesn't necessarily mean anything about that person as a whole. And if you make that assessment, that could torpedo your relationship a little bit, because it's a kind of you're just making a huge assumption about your partner that
Mm-hmm.
might not be true. And also, like, cultural factors can really influence which love language uh, we go for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I, I was raised kind of to feel like, which I don't even know if I got this from my parents or if I just decided this one day. I love things like chivalry and men who wine and dine me. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I kind of expect certain things that I think other women don't, like gifts, flowers, dates, what have you. Other people like you are much more about like, God, you, KB, work so much. And if somebody can take something off of your plate, then that is a much bigger deal for you.
Mm-hmm.
So just some openness about.
Yeah, I am for sure guilty of what you're talking about. Probably because I'm like, I don't say rejection sensitive, but I just have like a core belief that like, people don't really love me or like, yeah, just some insecure attachment stuff that I have. And so I'm
Mhm.
really I'm probably biased to like, wow, I show all these people that I love them so much and I'm working so hard to do that. And yet they don't love me as much. And I
Mhm.
could easily, I mean, this is like how these kind of core beliefs bias the way you see things. Like I will blind myself to the ways that that person is like showing up for me
Yeah.
and be like, well, it's because they didn't, I told them that I needed this and they didn't do it. So that's just proof that I'll die alone. I don't know. um,
Yeah,
so
totally.
yeah, I'm totally at fault of that.
I I think, yeah, I mean, the way I'm trying to think of like how I had this conversation with Jason recently because um a friend of mine was kind of accused of not putting in enough. And I was like, what do you like? How do you need me to express thoughtfulness or gratitude? Like, how do you need me to show up for you? And he's like, I just like being rubbed, like petted, like
Mm-hmm.
physical touch. It's like, but that can't be it. He's like, I don't know. I just really like being rubbed. Like, okay, but what else? Like, being rubbed. It's like,
I'm not a physical touch person because for me, I'm like, totally. Yeah, totally get that. And you're like, what? That's enough?
yeah, it's funny. I think, right, that would never be enough for me. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that is because I'm a woman. And if somebody is just giving me a bunch of physical touch, I'm like, of course you are. You just want sex. Like, this is what this
No, I
relationship
would
is
be
for.
like,
So there's my character
I have
assassination.
dated people specifically not like them as a person, but they gave great massages. The sex was great, great hugs, physical chemistry. I dated people that I was just like, oh, Kibby, don't do this. And whew, yeah, I'm a
Uh-huh.
physical touch person too. Yeah. See, you're not. You see.
Well, it's weird because I'm incredibly touchy. It's like I need the oxytocin, like I need the physical closeness. But he keeps like petting me and being like, "Doesn't this feel great?" I'm like, "I guess it feels fine."
See, not a true physical touch person.
But for him, it's like magic. I'm like, I seriously like this is all I need to do. This is so easy. I do this anyway. I love petting my partner. Like I like petting my partner more than I like being petted, I think.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, so that was awesome. I'm like, you're
That's
the easiest
nice.
person to date ever.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I kind of go for like, I'm going to make him feel good about himself, but also like he's having fun. And that's kind of my role.
Hmm.
Instead of being like, yeah, I'm gonna do a lot for him. Like I'm gonna make his life easier. Partly because I don't ever feel like I can make anybody's life easier because I just feel so incompetent all the time.
No, but
But
if I'm thinking about it, you do have acts of service, but just a different than, oh, I'm
emotional
fixing the
support.
faucet. Yeah, like emotional support, making things fun, right? Like
Uh,
I have seen you work hard to make a situation or a social setting or whatever fun or enjoyable or like, and that's
yeah.
just a different way of doing that, right?
Well, so I think that bleeds in well to our next conversation, which is tips, because I think people can kind of rigidly
Hmm. Yeah.
uh, understand what these love languages are. Like I wouldn't have even considered anything that I do in active service.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I do feel, I mean, I do put a lot of effort into helping people work through their problems and emotional support. And yeah, I do try to make everything fun and lively and kind of help people connect. And so I guess that could be considered an act of service, but I had never conceptualized it that way. So
Yeah.
without further ado, what are some tips you think
Yeah, we'll go
work for?
through different. I
Yeah.
mean, we'll go through the five love languages. I'm sure there's more. So the first
Mm-hmm.
step is to actually ask your partner, like, how do you receive love? And if it's not one of these five, yeah, get creative with that. Don't
Yeah.
say, wait, but it has to fit into the one of the five categories. And then you could kind of, and as you're saying, you don't have to rigidly think, like, no, I don't have enough money. How am I going to give
Mm-hmm.
gifts to this person, right? Like, you don't have to think about each of these things as like there's only one way to express it.
Mm-hmm.
You just get creative with it. So we'll talk about some things that you can do and maybe like avoid with this kind of person. Gifts is a really good one because I think, okay, you have to give that person something expensive and something pretty and shiny and whatever. So that's what turns me off. It's like that kind of gaudy show of like money. But
Mm-hmm.
gifts can be like, our friend Caitlin is such a good gift giver. Oh my gosh, that's her love language and she nails it. She will send me like a scrapbook of pictures of
Mm-hmm.
us with like words of affirmation. She blends the two because she's so good at gift giving. And she'll write like, remember when we did this, and this is how I feel about you. And it costs no money, but it's like she just made this physical, tangible example of like love for me.
Yeah,
What are you
it's
smiling?
so funny because when Caitlin gives me a gift, it's always money.
See,
Like,
she knows you.
exactly what I need.
She's that good at it. She's that good. Yeah, she'll send me like gift boxes online. So you could do this. There's a lot of these like gifting services, like gift boxes that you could select the different items. And it could just be something, it's like she knows that I like physical touch. Oh, she's so good. So she sends me things with like fuzzy socks and lotions and all that stuff. And yeah, it could be something you make. It could be something that you find online that just you like write down what that person wants or what something that they like, and then later on you could find it something on cheap, but something that's like homemade or
Yeah.
My husband also is an amazing gift giver.
Oh,
He's
nice.
very shy about it, but he's so good. This is the best gift I got from him. Is we were living on opposite sides of the country for a while I was pregnant,
Mhm.
and he got me a life-size pillow with a picture of himself in his
Oh, that's right.
pajamas with his arm up the way he would lay if we were cuddling.
Uh-huh.
And it's like a 6-foot pillow with him on it that I could cuddle when he's away. It was just, I brought it to every single domicile. Yeah, like, and I put him in all the living rooms that it freaks
Yeah.
people out. And it's, for that alone, it was worth it. But that's a really good example of like,
I think I've cuddled with the Alex pillow.
yeah, it's a good cuddler, He nails physical touch. But like something that's really personalized to that person, and doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be something you either make or spend a lot of money on, but just something that's very thoughtful. Like, I thought about what this person needs and they care
Mhm.
about, and here's a little token of that
Yeah.
I kept that in my mind and give it to you.
Mhm.
I would say not for gift giving. I would not buy something just because it's expensive. Like, I don't know. You tell me, but I feel like if gifts is your love language, then just like ordering something stock on Amazon, like, here's an expensive,
Yeah.
necklace. If that person doesn't like jewelry, right? Like, just
Yeah.
giving something for the sake of giving it, I would say I don't know if that's like the best use of that language.
No, I wouldn't do that either. I would say that when I give gifts to my partner, it's typically very expensive. But I
Mhm.
think that's because so for instance, I got I got Jason a pair of Air Jordans
Uh-huh.
for his birthday
Uh-huh.
no, sorry, for Christmas because he loves Air Jordans. And I was like looking at some pairs, they were like $200. And I was like, oh, yeah, they're good. But then I found one that was the perfect pair, and they were a lot more than $200. So I was like, I can't get anything less than the perfect gift. And I do think there's an element of like, yeah, I'm poor and me sacrificing a lot of money
Mhm.
is irresponsible and stupid, but it is a way that I feel like I'm expressing love.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was so sweet before. He knew
That's
I was
nice.
struggling with money at the time. And he was like, he didn't know what I'd gotten him yet. He was like, hey, babe, like, if you need to return my Christmas gift, that's really okay. I'm completely fine with that. I was like, that's so
Oh.
sweet. There's no way in hell I'm doing that though, because this is a really good gift.
That's nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
it shows that you put a lot of thought into it, right? That's not
Mhm.
expensive, is not the key to this love language. It's just that you're like, oh, this is the thing that's going to be
Yeah.
worthwhile.
Yeah.
The thing to not do, the don't do tip is getting something that's just, I mean, I think it's like anything that's thoughtless, getting something over and over and over again. Like, I remember in one of my relationships, someone just gave me flowers every time he messed up or after every
Mhm.
fight. And after a while, I just looked at this gift that's supposed to be the sign of love. And I'm just like, you don't even know what kind of flowers I like. And also,
Yeah.
like, this is the same goddamn bunch of flowers. And it's just like, now is a symbol of that you fucked up. So it's
Yeah.
just, yeah. So I know, like putting some, it's a thought behind it. Right.
Hmm. Hmm. So what about acts of service?
Oh, love acts of service.
Yeah, I know you should
Finishing
leave this one for
chores.
sure. I should have talked about gifts. God, that's my love.
Sorry. Well, we did. Well, You like receiving acts of service too, right?
I do, because I
feel
feel
like
like
that's
I
why we're
can't do
good
anything in
friends.
my life.
So why don't you tell me ways that you felt like a acts of service that's gone well?
Oh, goodness. I mean, giving me rides.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Jacqueline lives in a city that's primarily car based and she does not drive. So yeah, driving her around is one way I could show her love.
Yeah. One of the things that I really asked my last partner for was rides to Home Depot. And so Paul was actually great at acts of service a lot of the time. I got really into gardening and he built me some garden beds and drove me to Home Depot. He'd do that stuff. So yeah, like, and Jason actually just took me to Lowe's and like with his son, and we picked out a little planter and planted some cucumbers, and that was like, I was like thrilled about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what else? Fixing things, like my vacuum cleaner is always clogged or broken or something's wrong with it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I just love it when I know I can rely on somebody to help me put my life back together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, what are some of yours?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what I mentioned, like anytime someone has made me dinner feels really nice. Making food is always like that's something my mom does all the time. She bakes for
Mm-hmm.
me. Times when Alex takes off the mental load, like he's so good at thinking of a lot of things and sharing that emotional load that often is like a woman's job, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
yeah, he'll like take out the dog. He'll make appointments for the doctors when he'll do this kind of like household chore stuff. But also, if I really needed him, like I mentioned some other time needed to go to a surgery and he like came with me and then helped me
Mm-hmm.
come home and, settle in and make myself comfortable. Right. Like,
Yeah.
whether it's like chores or just like doing things to make my life easier, helping me with things, that is huge. It's really
Yeah.
huge.
I don't know if I normally conceptualize that. I'm trying to think if I get like a sense of romance out of that, or if it's just a sense of like, oh, thank God. I don't know. I mean, Jason got his passport recently so that we could go on a trip. And I don't know if that's an act of service or not, but I was thrilled by that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, yes, he did that for me. That's funny. Like an act of service I did for him was getting a physical and like getting my blood work done and
Mm-hmm.
getting a mark on my face checked out because his wife died of cancer. And he's always
Oh,
concerned
what a
that,
good way of doing acts of service. That's creative and very thoughtful.
thank you. I really should have done it earlier.
Yeah, my dad was an active service man. That's how he expressed love. I remember when I was a kid, he was like, "I have a present for you. I have a present," and he brought me to their bathroom and showed me the shower. And he had installed a shower head that was like my height. And
Aw.
at the time I was a bratty kid. I was like, oh, okay, that's whatever. But now I look back, I'm like, oh, of course, that's the way he expressed love. Like he wanted me to enjoy this big shower that they had and, like wanted me to enjoy it in my way. And it's just like, he put like a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
really sweet.
and to this day, I mean, if since I'm such a big acts of service person in my last relationships, when that hasn't been the case,
Mm-hmm.
and I could really think about it like, if the person adds to my responsibilities, right? If they just like bring something for me to just deal with and they don't help me with it, that's like, I feel very
Yeah.
unloved.
Yeah.
Or if I ask for help with something, like, can you help with, at the time I actually explicitly asked, like, I've brought dinner every night for the past couple of weeks. Like, do you mind like cooking something or ordering something for us? And, when that was like a fight, I felt so unloved because I was like, I'm doing this to help you. And can you not just like return the favor?
Yeah.
So,
It's so funny with me with acts of service. I feel so sheepish when I do so many of them. Like if I like help pick up things or I just like basic stuff sometimes in my program, be like, thank you so much. I'm like, I'm glad you noticed, but I feel really sheepish, like kind of so I'll often do, yeah, more like additive stuff like cooking or bringing
mm-hmm.
over a cake or something like that, where it's almost has more of the veneer of a gift. I feel much more comfortable with gifts for some reason.
The acts of service, that's not the way you express it, I guess. But I mean, you're bringing a really good point is if you are going out of your way to show that person the love language that they have, but it doesn't feel natural to you, it's going to be weird at first. That's okay. Like it's going to feel awkward to pick up the towels and knowing that that person like, oh, is going to like fawn over that. But for you, you're like, oh, really? This is what I have to do to show you I love you? Like, so that, and there's not one way to do things, right? Like you picking up after yourself versus like making a dinner. Those are two acts of service that one can feel really loving, one doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Words of affirmation. I use the written word for this most of the time because I have fears of intimacy and looking in someone's face and expressing gratitude or love can be very awkward for me. So
I'm giving you the opportunity to express your love to me. Go.
But if you think about the times I've done that, it's actually been
she won't even do it.
I know I won't do it. So it's been like
she'll do it to her cats. But I'm looking at her right now and asking for words of affirmation, and she's not doing it. So
I love you. You're amazing. It's like I hate doing it. It's like
that's a tip.
Yeah, it's like when people will ask, when we'll go on other podcasts and they'll say, "How did your podcast start?" I'll pay you lots of compliments indirectly. Be like, have you ever noticed that? Or like an Instagram, an Instagram post or something like that. I'll do the same thing with Jason a lot of the time. Like I'll talk about him on Instagram or on this podcast. And I do say nice things to him. I feel more comfortable saying nice things to him than other people, in part because he doesn't try to extract them. He'll do this thing where he'll start looking in my eyes and basically see how long it takes for me to look away or just become intensely uncomfortable. But when I proposed to Paul, I wrote sticky notes with all the things I loved about him. And so, and that was because I knew sometimes I can be a little lacking in that area and I wanted to overload on it. So I think
cards is a really beautiful way. I love how, you did it by writing things on and Post-it notes and putting it all over the house. It's a cool scavenger hunt, So words of affirmation. I think a lot of people have said that this is a tough one because if you're doing it without it being a natural thing for you, it could feel very fake or like overly cheesy or, forced. All of these can feel forced when you try it for the first time. So I think, your strategy of writing things, right? A text message, a card, as I mentioned, a friend wrote a scrapbook with nice things. I mean, these are all just ways that you could express your love for someone without having to stare them in the eye and say, Jacqueline, you are one of my dearest friends and I love you so much. I admire you every single day. You're brave, you're funny, you're intelligent. You do put a lot of effort into your friendships and I feel loved by you a lot. And you also push me out of my comfort zone, which is something that I find really valuable, and you do it effortlessly. And you're just, you sparkle in every room that you're in.
Thank you. Ditto.
She looks super uncomfortable, everyone.
But I also loved every second of it.
The words of affirmation at your wedding, which turned out to be not the wedding. Your friends and family sat around you on the night of your would have been wedding, and we had a living wake for you. So we went around the room and talked about all the things that we love about you and how what you mean to us. And so that was like a big words of affirmation night where it was just like, it's telling someone what they mean to you can be enough, right? You don't have to like shower them with all these compliments. You'd be like, you're one of the most important people in my life. I don't know.
Yeah. I loved that. And it was intensely awkward at the same time. I was like, as long as I don't have to make eye contact, this is great.
Yeah.
I think complimenting your partner to other people, it's more indirect, but in a way, I think it fits because you're creating a positive representation of them to the people that are going to need to accept them. And I think that it's kind of an act of service too, but
I would say something to not do if a person is a words of affirmation person is to mock them, make fun of them, be sarcastic. No, seriously, because there's some people who are so uncomfortable with this that
Yeah.
they're like, oh, they know I love them. And then they'll make fun of them in public or like with friends or to their face. And
Yeah.
oh, you're so ridiculous, or like something that's just like teasing, and that might be a way of that person still showing comfort and love. But for a
Yes.
person who's like a words of affirmation person, that is going to sting. That's going to feel
Yeah.
like, okay, great, yeah, ha ha ha, but like, can you actually one time express that you love me, or that you respect me or admire me in some way,
I think I've run into that trap. I tease a lot and I accept teasing a lot as well.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
But I think sometimes that I haven't done enough on the other side to equal it out.
Have to
Yeah.
work on that one.
Another thing I would say not to do, I see this all the time in reality TV and it makes me crazy, are cliches. Like
Oh yeah.
writing a card just filled with cliches. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's because people aren't very creative or in tune with themselves. And so, but to me, that shows you don't know who I am, or maybe you do, but you're not
Yeah.
showing me that you know that who I am or what
Mm-hmm.
I bring. And instead, you are enjoying that you're getting to experience love. And so you're going for love cliches and not saying anything specific about me.
That is a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Like, you're
All
great,
right.
you're amazing, you're the best, you're so beautiful. Like,
I've never felt this way before. You're my best friend. I mean, all of these things can be true. It's just when you pile them on top of each other,
yeah.
you make me want to be a better person. Like, you can say these things, but in your own words, and
Yeah.
that makes them real.
Yeah.
But just piling cliche on cliche is not. I would just like not know what to do with that.
Mm-hmm. Quality time, whatever you're doing, some kind of shared activity that you like to do, or just setting aside time for that person, dates, right? It's just like, it's really more, this is more of a mindfulness practice. This is like, can you put aside the rest of your life and dedicate your time and energy spending time with this person?
Yeah.
That could, like, for people who are really busy, this could be like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Or I'm around them all the time. What are you talking about? But
Yeah.
if you're living with that person, and I'm seeing this, with having a baby and getting married, moving in, spending a lot of time with Alex, but are we spending quality time? And we have to intentionally do that, even if it's like 30-minute coffee, or you had to take a walk together every morning and like really focus on talking to each other. Doing an activity, a shared activity, and like really being there, putting your phone down,
Yeah, I think putting phone down is important. This is a good opportunity to go for the self-expansion model and do challenging things together, things that are creative or push you out of your comfort zone. I think like one thing that means a lot to me is when my partner will do my hobby with me. So garden with me, cook with me, some sort of homesteading thing like pickling. Yeah. So that means a lot to me. And then I try, like with Jason, I've been watching a lot of hockey.
Yeah.
Or like going to concerts.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like what means a lot to this other person. And I think date nights are so important. Some people, and date nights can look very different. I know you prefer a couch to a high top. So a date night might look different for you than it looks for me. I'm like, I want to get dressed up. I want to go to a nice restaurant. I want to try new foods, and I want to like touch you the whole time, actually.
Yeah.
So there's that. And yeah, putting your phone away, I think I might have already said that, but that's a good practice.
Yeah. I think this quality time can be hard for me because, like the ADHD, and I'm also so focused on work and doing stuff and stressed out about, all the responsibilities, that I'm like, oh yeah, I went to that movie, but I was like thinking about other things, right? I mean, if this is hard for you, even just really segmenting out like a little bit of time, like, yeah, the morning coffee, or as you're saying, you could either do things that they enjoy doing or you enjoy doing. The best thing would be the shared interest, right? Like when Alex and I go to a concert, we're like fully in, or a movie, like we're fully in it together.
Mhm.
But it's kind of rough if you're just going to that other person's hobby, you don't care about it. And so you're like on your
Yeah.
phone or look bored or something like that. If this is hard for you, but quality time is so important for that partner, you can choose something that's exciting to you. Like, as you're saying, a challenge, going out of your comfort zone will bring your attention to it, right? You'll engage in that naturally,
Yeah.
and you get to be with your partner in that.
That's a
So I
good
think
point.
it's more like the shared reality is the shared attention and making memories together.
I actually think quality time is one of my most important because I get thrilled anytime my partner comes up with a new idea for something to do, or they like put effort into, okay, we're going to get out of the house and we're going to do this. Or if we're in the house, I'm like, yeah, like let's do something exciting in the house. So
Mhm.
just doing something together, I think, is one of the most important parts for me.
Yeah.
That just feels so obvious to me, but I guess that's because maybe that's one of my highest love
Yeah.
languages.
I think that we're getting something that's like, if things are obvious to you, that that's probably your primary love, one of your primary love languages. And if
Yeah.
things feel awkward or like not enough, it's not.
Hmm.
And speaking of which, physical touch, one of my favorites. Yeah, I've seen other models of love languages where like erotic touch, like sex, is a whole other category, right? So like, I think when people think of physical touch, you're like, oh man, of course, yeah, having sex or doing something sexual, of course that means love. But I, you can make this as broad or as narrow as you want, where even just like cuddling, touching, kissing, massages for me, holding my hand, giving me a hug when I'm, upset.
Hmm.
Those are really big ones.
Yeah. But I need those things too. But you're telling me I don't like physical touch.
That
I
might
think
not be
I'm
your
less.
primary.
I
I think you
don't know.
like receiving love in different ways. I think that's another thing. It's like you could like all of these things. If someone's doing all of these things, you are winning the intimacy game. But there might be ones that, like, if someone just touched you and didn't spend quality time with you, didn't say words of affirmation or accessories or gifts, would you feel loved?
No, I need
See?
all five of these and probably a lot more too. I think I might be just a love monster.
You're a
I'm just like,
love glutton. Look at you. You
I
want all
am.
of them. Ah,
I do
okay.
have I have high expectations for my partners, which is I think why I not keep, I went for so many men who showed up strongly in a lot of ways, but were missing some of the basic
Hmm.
maintenance strategies
Yeah.
like openness or
Yeah.
kindness.
Whenever we do these relationship episodes, it's always like, what's wrong with with Jacqueline's previous partners? That's just like, I feel a
I
little
know.
sad every time we talk about it.
I know.
But this shows the difference. If I have someone who like hugs me, touches me, and cuddles me like really well, and this like,
Yeah.
and not just like a, whatever pat me way, but like actually hugs me and is really present,
Yeah.
then I feel so loved. I mean, this is also because I love yoga and massage. And even when I was training in massages, you, massage classes were so fun because either you were massaging someone else or they were massaging you. So
Hmm.
you're getting massaged for half of the day at least.
Yeah.
And you can tell when someone is present when they're touching you or not. Like, you start to really pick up on the difference between someone who's expressing love through touch. They can just lay there. There's been some amazing life-changing massages where a person just like gently rested the heel of their hand on, one shoulder or back. And my whole body just melted and
Yeah.
just
That's
felt like,
bananas.
what, it's bananas, because that person got it, where a massage, a really good touch, is just that there's fully present. There's like a
Hmm.
mindfulness practice with touch. If someone's just, and if you've been to massages where they're just like digging their thumbs into your back and blah blah blah, up and down, blah, 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 and it feels almost kind of painful, that's not the same, right? So it's really
Yeah.
like physical touch as an expression of love and care is important, not just like someone grabbing you.
Yeah. I just like, if I have like one of my pet peeves, this is a ridiculous one. If you go to a restaurant and you have to sit across from each other, which is how you do it in most restaurants. You sit across from each other. I like have to have constant contact with my partner during a date, and just in general, or I'm not happy. I'm like, it just feels cold and personal. So that's why I say it's really huge for me. I think maybe like the specific way I'm touched is less important. I just need contact. I need contact in the car. We're always holding hands in the car. Yeah, basically just all the time. I don't know if that's a honeymoon phase, because I kind of still feel like even 8 months in that I'm in the honeymoon phase with Jason, but I don't know if that's just a honeymoon phase thing or if it lasts forever.
Yeah. But contact is the main thing. And even in sex therapy, I know some people hear physical touch and think, oh, I have to just have sex. Ugh, or they know that their partner is demanding or like expecting a love expression in a particular way with that kind of with sex. And in sex therapy, they talk about like you could be sexual without intercourse, right? It's real. And if you had different sex experiences, that sometimes that things could feel really loving and some things could feel like monotonous and rote. So even if you're just like cuddling, even if you're just kissing, like really being present and really like feeling that love to the person in that moment, and that could actually satisfy that person's love language of touch.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most complicated. It's like, it seems like the simplest, but it's one of the most complicated because sex is so complicated, and accusations of hypersexuality or the opposite, hypo, can make somebody feel really less than. And there could be so many different elements that are causing sex to, and we'll do an episode on this, but cause sex to show up in good ways or bad ways in the relationship. PDA is another one. Like, I'm a PDA queen. I'm sure I just disgust everyone in the universe, especially my friends, but I'm like not giving it up. And I've had partners where they're like, yeah, I'm not into PDA. And it really hurts the honeymoon period for me. So I'm like, well, I don't feel close to you at all right now. Like, this isn't, I don't have that feeling that I want.
Yeah.
So yeah, very complicated, very touchy subject. Touchy. I hate puns, but if they're accidental, that's okay.
Still cheesy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'd love to hear from you about any additional love languages that you've noticed, because as we've said, I mean, the research is kind of proving that these are bullshit, but all of these love languages are still such important aspects of relationships. So in that sense, they're not bullshit. Like, yeah.
And it can at least help you brainstorm and really think about like, how do I receive and express love? It may not be that one of those 5, but just think about that and think about how is your partner doing that? Is there a mismatch? Do you want more of something? And feel free to like ask and express that, right? Because if a person most likely are just going to go with their default primary love language. And it's not that they don't care. It's not that they, are thoughtless, but that's literally how they understand love. So you can, it's not a shameful or a bad thing to actually ask for something like that. So there's some way to receive love in the way that you like to.
Yeah. I think the takeaway of like what not to get wrapped up in is thinking that you have to have one of these be your love language over the others, or that your love language has to be one of these 5, or that I just think this is too constraining. But yeah, the idea that these are important aspects of relationships, and so they can give you a good starting point. And then, as you're saying, having conversations with your partner about what's important to them, how you show love.
Yeah. And if you're curious about reading the original book, it's called The 5 Love Languages: How to Express Heartfelt Commitment to Your Mate, by Gary Chapman. I'll put that on the show notes.
Fabulous. Well, the way Kibby and I receive love is through 5-star ratings on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And again, words of affirmation in the reviews. We'll take some of those as well. And we will see you all in 2 weeks. By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval.